Welcome back to another episode of Offbeat Adventures. We're standing here once again on the grade of the former Canadian Northern Railway and later Canadian National Railways, Dorion, and then subsequently Kinghorn Subdivision. We are on the west bank of the Blackwater River. We are kind of in the middle of nowhere. We're in between two communities. So to the east of us is Jellicoe and to the west of us is Beardmore. We're actually going to be heading towards Beardmore. We're here in the municipality of Greenstone, Ontario. So the bridge that you see in front of us is actually the third crossing of the Blackwater River. We're not going to be exploring that today. We're going to have done that in a previous episode, but we're actually going to be taking a look at that tomorrow. We've actually been through here before, so I've kind of not necessarily on a full exploration. This is not a redo, but we've explored this area before, so it's kind of not new to us. So we're going to head west, and we're going to be going about 4.5 miles or so, and then tying in with a previous hike that we did, which terminates near the site of an old gold mine just east of Beardmore. I'm just taking a look here if there's a flanger sign for that bridge crossing. I don't see one. We're going to be running alongside the Blackwater River here quite a bit. Here you can see there's a tie. So while we have a minute here, I do apologize. It's a very goofy day. It's the 1st of June. It's not particularly warm. We had a very bad winter, and we've had a very crazy spring. It took a while for the snow to go away, just because spring was so bad, and we kept getting snow in the spring. And then it's just like the snow went like this. It just disappeared very quickly, and the leaves have kind of come out. The grass has kind of come out very, very quickly. And this has sort of complicated some of our hikes. We're kind of right at the end of the ideal sort of spring hiking season, because as the leaves come out and the grass comes out, it makes it a lot harder to see things. And so we had sort of a cold front pass through, and there's this cold northwest wind that's kind of going to be blowing right in our faces as we head back. So I've kind of bundled up. Like I said, you know, beginning of June, you think it'd be warm. Today's not warm by any stretch. This morning I was actually regretting not bringing my gloves, because when we started out this morning it was very cold. My hands were frozen. Okay, so we should do our usual history lesson while we got a minute here. So this line was built by Canadian Northern Railway between 1911 and 1914. It was going to be one of the final pieces in Canadian Northern's transcontinental ambitions. The Canadian Northern Company got their start in Manitoba in 1896 by acquiring some charters and things like that. Their first big project was the construction of a line between the then city of Port Arthur, which is now Thunder Bay, and Winnipeg, and that line was built between 1899 and 1902. Then they began building lines all throughout the prairies, and they also at the same time started building north from Toronto, eventually reaching up into the Sudbury area. Now we have to pause here for a second, and this kind of ties in with our story. So we do have a junction box for the fiber optic cable that runs alongside the grade. Just as a side note, and I know I've had some people ask me about this, because they'll see these periodically in the bush. Those little markers there, they put them here, but they'll also put them alongside the grade to mark where the fiber optic cable is. So that's, if you see something orangey reddy that's in the bush as we're driving by or riding by, that's what those are. So you see the mileage here. So the mileage is 64.78, and that is the mileage on the last iteration of this line, which is the Kinghorn Subdivision. The original lines, which I'm going to be talking about in a second here, you need to subtract 49.7 miles, and I'll talk more about that because we do have a milepost marker coming up. All right, so Canadian Northern unfortunately realized at some point that they would have to build that in order for the company to be successful long term, that they would have to build a transcontinental connection. Now the problem is they didn't want to build this section of line. They did not want to build between the Sudbury area, specifically Ruel, and Port Arthur, because the construction was going to be difficult, and you're going to see some examples of that, and it was going to be very expensive. And so they looked at many options for a lot of years. Unfortunately, they got to the point where they were forced to build. And so again, construction started in 1911, and the last spike was driven on New Year's Day 1914. And the line opened for traffic in 1915. Now, unfortunately, Canadian Northern, not long after, started running into financial difficulties caused by some of the construction that they were undertaking, like, for example, this line and some of the lines through the mountains of British Columbia, as well as some of the financial issues that were generated by World War I. And so by 1917, the company was essentially bankrupt and had to be taken over by the Canadian government. And in 1918, the company was forced to merge, amalgamate, whatever descriptor you want to use, with a bunch of other Canadian government-owned bankrupt lines known as the Canadian Government Railways. And that merger produced a new railway company known as the Canadian National Railways. And so the process of nationalization took 5 years, so it was completed in 1923. And in 1923, the name of this line changed. It went from the Nipigon Subdivision of Canadian Northern Railway to the Dorion Subdivision of Canadian National Railways. And it continued as such until 1960, when Canadian National went through a major reorganization that year. They changed their name from Canadian National Railways, plural, to Canadian National Railway. They adopted their modern logo, which is very iconic. And they did some reorganizations of their line, including this one. And so this line, the Dorion subdivision, was merged with the more easterly Kinghorn subdivision, which is basically just like 15-16 miles that way. The whole line became the Kinghorn subdivision. And that continued until 2005, when CN decided to discontinue service on this line. And beginning in 2008, they began pulling up the rails, and that process was complete by 2005. Now, I mentioned earlier when we saw the junction box that we would come back to the whole mileage thing. So here we have the first of a few milepost markers that we're going to see on the line here. And so this is milepost 65. And so again, that is the mileage that is measured on the Kinghorn subdivision. And the Kinghorn measured its mileage from a place called Longlac to Port Arthur and later Thunder Bay. And then, so when we take a look at the original lines, the Nipigon subdivision, the Dorion subdivision, we have to subtract 49.7 miles because the original lines started in Jellicoe, not Longlac. And so the original mileage for this line would have been 15. It would have been 15.3 as opposed to milepost 65, right? Because you subtract the 49.7. Now, little interesting thing. I'm going to take my helmet off here. I noticed this. So I was through here a couple times already. So through here last summer, and then I was through here in the fall. I saw this little sign here, and I didn't know what it was. You can see there's ants crawling all over it. So it's kind of hard to see, but it says Section 3. And so I kind of asked around, and apparently part of it is cut off. Here you can see part of the sign is broken. But what this might be is this might actually be a sign that designates the limits of some of these sections for the section crews on the line. So this one, it's obviously a wood one, so it's probably been here for quite a while. I don't know how far it dates back to. Now I got ants crawling on me. But certainly it's something that dates back quite a number of years. I doubt this is kind of a more modern sign. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to hop back up on the grade, and we're just going to continue our westward journey here. All right, before we get going, we're still here at milepost 65. I wanted to take a picture of the sign, and I just happened to notice that there was a board lying right beside this one. And so what we have is we actually have the the other part of the sign. So remember I said it was broken? So there you see section 3, and so here's the sign that says section 2. So again, basically the dividing point between two maintenance sections on the railway line. I'm going to flip these over to try to sort of preserve them a little bit. Maybe at some point I should come back and try to grab these and make sure they end up in a museum or something somewhere, because eventually they'll just rot and deteriorate. All right, let's strap in here and get back on the bike. All right, so we're just passing through a cut here. It was kind of, well, it's nice that the sun is out, but it was a little nicer this morning because there was a bit of cloud, and so you didn't get all these sort of goofy shadows that you're seeing right now. I like when things are a little bit more diffused. It was kind of a more like sort of bright overcast, which is sort of perfect for these types of explorations. Now we're going to we got a pause coming up here. We do have a creek that's passing under the grade. So this is Ralph Creek, and so Ralph Creek flows to the north and obviously empties into the Blackwater River. As I mentioned earlier, we did have a we had a lot of snow in the winter. We had a lot of snow in the spring, and we've had some rain since then. So it's a lot wetter than it was last year. And so when I was here last summer, I actually went down and filmed this culvert, this crossing, which was very fortuitous because I would not be able to get in there to record anything right now. It is just way too wet. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use that footage from last year. Okay, so we're down here on the south side of the grade. And so here you can see fairly large diameter concrete culvert. It looks like maybe about a 5-footer or so, maybe a 6-footer. You can see the beaver's been at work, and so you can see that this area looks like it's all kind of flooded here, and you can see all of the debris that the beaver has sort of piled up here. I don't know how active this is because there is quite a bit of water that's still flowing through here, and generally that doesn't happen with the beavers. Usually they don't like to hear that sound of running water. The inside of the culvert looks like it's in pretty good shape. There's been a little bit of shifting. Over here you can kind of see a little bit of the mortar between the joint kind of coming out a little bit. But other than that, it seems like it's okay. So we're going to jump the grade and go take a look at the north side. All right, so we're down here on the north side of the grade, and we can get a little bit closer here. And so you can see, again, there is a fair amount of water that's coming out of the a culvert. Again, it's in decent shape. One of the interesting things, and maybe this will kind of attest to the construction. I don't know if you can see this. There's some sunlight coming through. You can see kind of all of the stacked rocks here all along the side. And this looks like it's been here for a while, and you can kind of see the moss that's growing on the side of the culvert. So again, the culvert itself is probably been here for quite some time. You can see over here some of the rock work, and I don't know if that tie has been thrown there on purpose or it's been thrown there to kind of act as some erosion control. But anyway, we're going to hop back up on the grade here and just continue working our way west towards Beardmore.